Have you ever felt like you live in a world of masks? That the people around you repeat values without ever questioning them? That something inside you cries out for a deeper truth, even when everyone else seems satisfied with the surface of things? If you've ever felt this way, then you've experienced Nietzsche's first awakening, the realization that the human herd lives asleep and you are painfully awake. Friedrich Nietzsche documented a psychological pattern so disturbing that many philosophers tried to censor it. He observed that the most profound and conscious human beings go through a dangerous transformation, an awakening so intense that most prefer to remain asleep. What I'm about to reveal isn't just Nietzsche's philosophy, it's the map of your own awakening, the cartography of a transformation that few have the courage to complete. The man who remains asleep will never face this pain. He will be content with inherited values, with imposed moralities, with goals that others have defined for him. But you are not like that. If you were, you wouldn't be watching this video. You already feel the weight of the invisible chains and you're looking for the hammer to break them. Nietzsche realized something that modern psychology is still trying to understand. When a human being awakens to their true nature, they can no longer live as before. They can no longer comfortably participate in collective illusions. They can no longer pretend not to see the inconsistencies in the stories society tells itself. Like someone who sees colors in a world of the blind, they become simultaneously more powerful and more isolated. And that's why most choose to remain asleep. It's easier, it's more comfortable, it's safer. But you're not here for the easy, the comfortable, or the safe, are you? You're here because something inside you recognizes a truth that Nietzsche revealed more than a century ago. The human being is not an end, but a bridge, a rope stretched over an abyss between the animal and the Superman. Today, I will show you how Nietzsche mapped this transformation in 3 stages that he observed in the exceptional human beings he studied, why these people begin to distance themselves from the masses, how they transcend conventional good and evil, and most importantly, how you can recognize these same stages in your own life. Because what Nietzsche called the Superman is not an abstract concept or an unattainable ideal. It's a living possibility, breathing within you at this very moment. If you're ready to see beyond the illusions, to question what has never been questioned, and to transform your life into a genuine work of art, keep watching. Nietzsche didn't offer comfort, he offered liberation, and that's what I'm offering you now. Nietzsche's most disturbing case begins with what he called the death of God, not as a theological statement, but as a cultural diagnosis. What he perceived was something much deeper than a debate about religion. He saw that the absolute foundations of Western civilization were crumbling, and that most people continued living as if nothing had changed. They didn't realize that the ground had been removed from under their feet. Nietzsche documented this pattern in the lives of extraordinary people. When someone truly understands that there are no longer absolute foundations for values, 2 things can happen. Most fall into nihilism, the feeling that nothing matters, that everything is meaningless. But some, very few, discover an unprecedented freedom, the freedom to create values, to become artists of their own existence, to transcend what Nietzsche called slave morality and embark on the dangerous journey toward radical authenticity. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that all the shoulds that guided your life are arbitrary conventions, that the rules you followed, the goals you pursued, the definitions of success you accepted, all were imposed on you by a society based on fear and control, that your life so far has been lived according to a script you never chose. This is the first awakening, and it's devastating. Nietzsche observed that those who experience this awakening generally go through 3 metamorphoses, which he described in his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. First, you become the camel, carrying the weight of expectations, traditions, and values imposed upon you. Then, you transform into the lion, who destroys the tablets of old values, who roars "I will" in the face of "thou shalt." And finally, for those few who persist, comes the 3rd metamorphosis, the child, representing a new beginning, a new creation, the birth of the Superman. Each metamorphosis is more difficult and dangerous than the previous one, and each one distances you further from the sleeping crowd, not because you hate them, but because you can no longer share in their illusions. It's as Jung documented about awakened people. They silently disappear from society, not with anger, not dramatically. They are just disappearing, disconnecting, leaving social networks, abandoning careers, ending relationships, choosing solitude instead of society. If you're feeling increasingly distant from the trivial conversations, the empty ambitions, and the unexamined values around you, you're not going crazy. You're beginning to experience what Nietzsche identified as the process of self-overcoming that leads to the Superman. Comment below if you felt this distancing from the concerns that seem to consume people around you. Have you noticed that you can no longer care about things everyone everyone else seems to consider important? That's the first sign of the Nietzschean awakening. Let's explore the first metamorphosis more deeply. The camel. The camel is the spirit that bears weight, that kneels to receive the heaviest burdens. What is heaviest? Asks Zarathustra. And the answer is, all the traditions, rules, expectations, and beliefs we've been conditioned to accept. Nietzsche realized something frightening. Most people remain in the camel stage for their entire lives. They take pride in their capacity to endure, in their moral strength, in their conformity to values they've never questioned. They carry these burdens across the desert of life, believing their obedience will be rewarded. And the saddest part? They call this virtue. Do you recognize the camel in yourself? Do you feel pride in your ability to tolerate unsatisfying relationships because it's the right thing? Do you pursue a career that sparks no passion because it's the responsible choice? Do you repress your true desires because it's the moral thing to do? The most dangerous thing about this phase is the disguised comfort it offers. There's safety in following the herd, in having your values defined by others, in never having to face the abyss of absolute freedom. Nietzsche observed that many people prefer comfortable servitude to terrifying freedom. But for those destined for awakening, the camel stage becomes increasingly unbearable. It begins as a subtle discomfort, a feeling that something is wrong. You look at your life, your relationships, your career, your beliefs, and you feel a growing dissonance, as if you're playing a role in a play that no longer makes sense. And then, one day, it happens. The camel rebels. Something inside you roars, and the lion awakens. The lion is the destructive force, the great no that destroys the tablets of old values. This is the most feared, most misunderstood, and most necessary stage of the Nietzschean journey. It's when you begin to question everything, and when I say everything, I mean everything. Why do you work at the job you work? Why are you in the relationship you're in? Why do you believe what you believe? Not the superficial answers, but the true reasons. And the more you dig, the more you realize how many of your choices were made to please others, to conform, to be good, according to standards you never chose. Nietzsche documented how this stage often coincides with periods of crisis, what he called the great nausea, or the hour of great contempt. It's when you begin to see the mediocrity, the hypocrisy, and the emptiness of the life that was planned for you. It's when the values of the herd begin to seem not just wrong, but suffocating. This is the most dangerous phase. It's when relationships end, careers are abandoned, long-held beliefs are discarded. It's when the people around you begin to say that you've changed, and not as a compliment. It's when you begin to experience the isolation that comes with awakening. Nietzsche observed that many retreat at this point. The lion's roar frightens them. Freedom seems too empty, too dangerous. The destruction of old values creates a temporary vacuum, and that vacuum can be terrifying. It's what he called facing the abyss, looking at a world without prefabricated meaning and feeling vertigo. Those who retreat, who flee back to the safety of the herd, often become the most fervent defenders of old values. They cling even more tightly to the illusions they almost abandoned. They become the perfect camels, carrying their burdens with renewed zeal, never admitting the moment when they almost freed themselves. But for those who persist, for those who endure the lion's roar, and the temporary emptiness it creates, something extraordinary begins to happen. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, you begin to create your own values. Not by blindly adopting new dogmas, but by testing, experimenting, discovering what truly resonates with your deepest nature. This is the beginning of the third metamorphosis, the child. The child is innocence and forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a wheel rolling on its own, a first movement, a sacred yes. The child doesn't carry the camel's burden nor need the lion's destructive fury. The child simply creates, plays, says yes to life on its own terms. This is the stage that Nietzsche associated with the birth of the Superman, the human being who has overcome himself, who has transcended conventional good and evil, who lives according to values he himself created. But the Superman is not the end of the journey. It's just the beginning of a new form of existence, an authentic, creative, affirmative existence, an existence that says yes to life in all its tragedy and comedy, in all its pleasure and pain, what Nietzsche called amor fati, the love of fate. Here's what few understand about Nietzsche's philosophy. The Superman is not about power over others. It's about power over oneself. It's about the ability to create values in a world without absolutes, to find meaning in an indifferent universe, to transform one's life into a work of art. And this is the most dangerous truth that Nietzsche discovered. You don't need permission to do this. You don't need approval. You don't need someone to tell you that you're right. You only need the courage to face the abyss of freedom and create something meaningful from it. This is the most radical awakening a human being can experience, and that's why so few complete the journey. Because it requires brutal honesty, fierce courage, and the willingness to stand alone if necessary in defense of your deepest truth. What makes Nietzsche's discovery so disturbing is that he saw how this process of awakening is not just difficult, it's almost unbearably lonely. As he wrote, "It becomes increasingly clear to me that the philosopher, being by necessity a man of tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, has always found himself and had to find himself in contradiction with his today." Nietzsche's Superman is not understood in his time. How could he be? He operates from values that don't yet exist for others. He sees possibilities that others cannot imagine. He lives a life that seems incomprehensible, even threatening, to those still trapped in herd morality. Nietzsche documented this pattern in his own life. As his philosophy developed, his circle of friends and acquaintances diminished. People couldn't understand what he was trying to say. Or worse, they partially understood and were horrified. He experienced what we would now call cancellation firsthand. This is a crucial part of the process that Nietzsche identified. The awakening demands that you be willing to be misunderstood, to be judged, to be rejected, not because you've become worse, but because you've become different, because you no longer play by the same values, no longer operate within the same system that others take for granted. As Jung observed about people who awaken, when you have felt the need to withdraw, to disappear, to leave everything behind, Jung would say that you are not antisocial. You are becoming too conscious for the collective container. This is the price of authenticity in a world of masks. This is the cost of freedom in a society of happy slaves. This is the necessary sacrifice for the birth of the Superman. But Nietzsche also saw something beyond this initial isolation. He foresaw a time when those who awakened would find each other, when new communities would be formed, not based on inherited values or unquestionable dogmas, but around a shared commitment to radical authenticity and the continuous creation of values. He called these individuals free spirits and referred to them as his true readers, his companions. Although many of them had not yet been born in his time, he wrote for the future, for those who would be ready to hear what he had to say. For people like you, watching this video now, what makes the Nietzschean journey to the Superman so difficult is not just the isolation, it's the absence of a map. When you leave the territory of established values, you enter an unknown land. There are no signs pointing the way. There are no clear metrics of success. There are no authorities to confirm that you're on the right path. This uncertainty is terrifying. How do you know you're not just deluding yourself? How can you be sure that your rejection of established values isn't just disguised resentment? How can you trust your own judgment when it contradicts everything you've been taught? Nietzsche answered these doubts with his concept of the will to power, not the desire to dominate others, but the drive to overcome oneself, to grow, to become more. The authentic will to power manifests as a feeling of expansion, of abundance, of increased capacity to face life on your own terms. In contrast, what he called slave morality always manifests as contraction, as diminishment, as a narrowing of life's possibilities. It's easy to confuse the two, especially at the beginning of the journey. Many people think they're liberating themselves when they're just trading one set of chains for another. That's why Nietzsche emphasized the importance of the spirit of experimentation, the willingness to test new values, new ways of living, without permanently committing to any of them. As he wrote, "I am not a man, I am dynamite." He understood that the process of becoming the Superman requires periodic explosions that destroy old certainties and make room for new possibilities. But here's what makes the Nietzschean process so counterintuitive. You don't become the Superman by abandoning everything at once. You don't get there through a sudden revolution. It's a gradual process of continuous self-overcoming. It's the constant practice of what he called becoming what one is. And this requires discipline. Not discipline imposed from outside, but self-discipline that comes from within. The ability to establish your own rules and follow them because they serve your growth, not because someone told you that you should. Nietzsche observed that those who truly embark on this journey develop what he called a second body, an internal structure that replaces the external structures they've abandoned. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of his philosophy. Many think Nietzsche advocated a kind of hedonistic chaos. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Superman is not less disciplined than the common man. He is more so. But his discipline comes from within, from his authentic will to power, from his commitment to his own growth. As Nietzsche wrote, "I teach you the Superman. Man is something to be overcome." This overcoming doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen just by wishing. It happens through what he called the long practice of command and obedience. Only now you command yourself and obey yourself. You become simultaneously the artist and the work of art. Let's examine how this transformation manifests in real life. When you begin to awaken to Nietzsche's philosophy, you begin to see patterns in your own life that you never noticed before. You begin to notice how many of your decisions were made from fear, not from authentic desire. How much of yourself is just a collection of masks adapted for different audiences. How little of your life was really chosen by you. This initial realization is devastating. Many retreat at this point. They prefer the comfortable illusion that they are the authors of their own lives, even when evidence indicates otherwise. They choose what Nietzsche called the last will of man, the will to nothingness, the desire to remain small and comfortable, rather than face the truth of their situation. But for those who persist, something remarkable begins to happen. You begin to make different choices. Small ones at first. You say no to commitments you would have automatically accepted before. You begin to question habits you always considered part of your identity. You begin to experiment with new ways of thinking, feeling, being. And each successful experiment gives you more courage for the next one. You begin to trust your own judgment, your own experience, more than the opinions of others or social conventions. You begin to develop what Nietzsche called the pathos of distance, the ability to distance yourself from inherited values and judgments and see them for what they really are, human tools, not divine truths. This distance isn't cold or arrogant. It's the necessary space for creation. Just as an artist needs to step back from the canvas to see the painting as a whole, you need to distance yourself from inherited values to create something genuinely your own. And here's the most surprising part of this journey. As you become more authentic, you also become more generous, not with the false generosity that seeks approval, but with a genuine abundance of spirit. As Nietzsche wrote, "Of all that is written, I love only what a man has written with his blood." The Superman is not a misanthrope, not someone who despises others. He simply doesn't need them in the same way anymore. His relationship with the world shifts from dependence to interdependence, from need to free choice. He can give without expecting return because he isn't operating from lack, but from abundance. Nietzsche saw this transformation in himself and in those he studied. He noticed how, paradoxically, those who most deeply freed themselves from conventional values often became their most genuine representatives, not from blind obedience, but because they rediscovered for themselves the real value behind the empty conventions. For example, someone who deeply questions the value of honesty might, after serious reflection, choose to be honest, not because they should, not because they fear punishment or seek reward, but because they've discovered that honesty serves their own will to power, their own growth and expansion. This is the kind of integrity that Nietzsche associated with the Superman, not conformity to external rules, but consistency with self-chosen values. It's a much more demanding integrity, much harder to maintain, because there's no one to blame when you fail. There's no "the devil made me do it" or "everybody does it." There's just you, your chosen values, and your responsibility for them. And this total responsibility is what makes Nietzsche's path so terrifying for most people. It's much easier to live according to rules that others have established. It's much more comfortable to be able to say, "I was just following orders," or "that's how things are done." Taking full responsibility for the creation of values requires a courage that few possess. But for those who have that courage, the reward is immense. A life lived on your own terms. An existence that is genuinely yours. What Nietzsche called becoming who you are, not in the superficial sense of follow your passion, but in the deep sense of creating yourself as a unique work of art. Nietzsche's most disturbing case, what truly shocks those who encounter his philosophy for the first time, is that he saw the awakening of the Superman not as a destiny for everyone, but as a possibility for a few. He didn't believe that everyone could or should embark on this journey. As he provocatively wrote, "To live, that means for us to constantly transform into light and flame all that we are, and also all that affects us. We cannot do otherwise. But that flame doesn't burn in everyone with the same intensity. Some are genuinely happier, more fulfilled, living according to established values, being part of the herd, or as he sometimes called it, the last man." And Nietzsche, in his most lucid moments, recognized this. He understood that his philosophy was dangerous, precisely because it wasn't for everyone. The question you should ask yourself is not, "Should I follow Nietzsche?" but "Does this philosophy resonate with something that's already inside me?" If you feel the call to create your own values, if you've already begun to question the foundations of conventional morality, if you long for a more authentic existence, then perhaps you're one of those for whom Nietzsche wrote, as he said, "For the few, or for no one. I want to run away from everyone who is only interested in everyone." He knew that his true readers would recognize themselves in his words, that they would feel that shiver of recognition that comes when someone articulates something you've always known, but could never express. If you felt that shiver watching this video, if something in you resonated with this exploration of Nietzsche's Superman, then perhaps you're already on the path. Perhaps you've already begun the transition from the camel to the lion, and are glimpsing the possibility of the child who creates values. Remember, the Superman is not a final goal, but an ongoing process. It's not something you become once and for all, but something you practice daily through continuous self-overcoming. As Nietzsche wrote, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." Each challenge, each questioning, each moment of doubt or despair is an opportunity to grow, to become more than you were. The most disturbing case that Nietzsche documented is the fact that this journey has no end. There's no point where you can say, "Now I am the Superman," and rest on your laurels. It's a path of perpetual growth, perpetual questioning, perpetual creation. As he wrote, "Become who you are," an imperative in the continuous present, not a final state to be achieved. And perhaps this is the true courage that Nietzsche saw in the Superman, the courage to live without guarantees, without finalities, without absolutes, the courage to create meaning in a universe that offers none ready-made, the courage to love life, not despite its transience and suffering, but because of them. What he called amor fati, the love of fate. My formula for human greatness is amor fati, not wanting anything to be different, not ahead, not behind, not for all eternity, not just enduring the necessary, still less concealing it, but loving it. This is the final transformation that Nietzsche saw, from rejection of life to total embrace of life, from the resentful no to the ecstatic yes, from reaction to creation, from slave to sovereign, from man to Superman. If something in you recognizes this possibility, if something in you desires this transformation, then you've already begun the journey. You've already taken the first step to become who you are. Write in the comments, "I choose to create my own values," if you're ready to take the next step in this journey. If you're wondering what comes next, how to navigate the stages of the Nietzschean awakening, how to face the isolation and uncertainty that accompany this journey, subscribe to this channel. In upcoming videos, I'll explore practical techniques for implementing Nietzsche's philosophy in your everyday life, for developing the strength necessary to create your own values, and for finding others who are on the same path. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. As Nietzsche wrote, "There are free spirits who might be hidden somewhere, companions I live seeking." Perhaps you're one of them. Perhaps this is the moment when you begin to discover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.